Okay, hi everybody. This is Egoic Lotus webinar commentaries for, well, a kind of video book on the Egoic Lotus. And we're into program 19, and we're going to take our study, our preparatory study, from A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page 1080 to 1082. There are a couple of paragraphs I would like to discuss before we get into the different types of monads. Sometimes DK calls these egos, but it seems pretty clear to me that they are monads, maybe that have produced various egoic types. But it seems to me the monad is definitely behind the egoic type. And we are not given any certain number of petals, and these beings are called points. And the fact that they are called points leads me to believe that they are units of being. So let us look here. A great factor, and one that is hard to explain so that the average thinker can understand it, is the cyclic coming in of egos who are at a point in evolution where they are ready for their first radioactive life. A radioactive life, I think, begins as one becomes a radiant lotus. The word RAD, or raid, is there. And that begins with the initiation process. So we can say that this way, initiation is the induction of radioactivity. In one great department of the hierarchical endeavor, all egos are divided into two groups. You see, of course, the division may take place on the place of the ego, but behind it, I believe, is the monad. And we can talk about egos that are produced by particular types of monads. All egos are divided into two groups according to their cycle and according to their type of energy. And by cycle, I suppose it means when they came in, and the type of energy has to do with their particular quality. So one relates to time, the cycle, and the other relates to a particular division of the one life, that is, quality. These grades are in turn subdivided according to the quality and vibratory effect to be induced upon any one kingdom of nature by their united or single incarnation, because these groups do have an effect, and one wants to know what their service will be. So they are divided according, in a sense here, to the service they will render. The quality and the vibratory effect to be induced upon any one kingdom of nature by their united or single incarnation. So the original division, cycle and type of energy, and then a further division according to their effects. This might be illustrated by pointing out that by the gradual coming in of human beings who are vegetarians by natural instinct, instead of what he calls, it's quite dramatic, the cruel meat-eating groups of the last 500 years. Okay, so who are vegetarians by natural inclination and by the appearance of egos, who are specifically interested specifically in the welfare and nurture of animals, two different kinds of groups here. We have, of course, there will be naturally overlaps, of course. We have the cyclic appearance of a whole group of human units who have a definite karmic relation to the third kingdom. So the appearance of certain types of, what can we call them? Can we call them here monad egos? Can we call them that? As if blending the two. Really, the two are blended. Without the monad, there would be no ego. The solar angel is a support, but the solar angel has not itself, alone and unaided, created the ego. The ego is really an extension of the monad. Any type of consciousness is the extension of our own monad, supplemented, augmented by a type of infusing of consciousness that the solar angel makes possible. So this relation is of a differing in specific details from and here he goes, I misquoted a little, but it's pretty close, from the meat-eating and oft inhuman groups of the past 500 years. Yeah, okay. The word cruel was not there, but I think the word inhuman was there. Not treating the animals in a humane way. All of this somehow related to early karma. He tells us where the human kingdom was devastated at times by the animal kingdom, but okay, maybe enough is enough. Okay, so the different types of monad egos coming in will have a particular effect on other kingdoms. Obviously, the vegetarians and those who are into the nurture of animals affects the animal kingdom in a certain manner, and the meat-eating and often human groups in another manner. It might be of profit if we here enumerated some of the occult terms applied to some of these differentiated groups of monad egos, remembering that we are only touching upon a few out of a vast number, and again you begin to realize what a master like Master DK must know, and well, you begin to wonder how he learned it. Some of it, of course, would not be available to even the earnest human student. One would have to be pretty well a fourth or maybe fifth degree initiate to read the inner libraries, the text from the inner libraries, and see the presentations of the inner facts in order to understand this kind of material, to have this presented. And only name those, the terminology of which conveys information and educational benefit to the student. Now what I've done is, I've thought about this in the past, and never enough, because it's always so deep, nor can I give full explanation of any. But I have some notes here that might be of interest. Units of the fire mist. We know that the fire mist is associated with the logoic plane. And the fire mist is a stage in the nebular formation of that which precipitates into denser form. So the nebula comes first, the fire mist, and the sea of fire is that in which the fire mist occurs. When we say mist, it seems like a blend of fire and water being that out of which matter is precipitated. We begin to see the nebular construction of the fire mist. These monads, it seems, associated with the logoic plane, that is, with the sea of fire. If we interpret fire mist in this way, a field of activity beyond the monadic plane is indicated, I think we understand that the monadic plane is here. It is the first plane of sevenfold form. The sea of fire is found here, the first plane of the logos. And so, in a way, these beings relate to this divine plane. Of course, I have often said that the monadic plane is the present place of expression, of that aspect of ourselves which we call the monad. But there is within us a volatile essence, a flying essence, which can liberate itself from the present monadic vehicle made of monadic essence and elemental essence of the monadic plane. And when that is liberated from the monadic vehicle, it flies, volatile, volare, flies to the divine plane, and there it takes up a different kind of habitation. So it seems like the monad actually, in a way, begins, there is no beginning, but in terms of the cosmic physical plane, it seems to begin on the logoic plane and then takes up habitation on the monadic plane. If at a certain initiation something, the essence of the monad, is liberated onto a higher plane, it has to have been an essence which has come from higher planes than the one in which it is now encased. Okay, so the degree to which such monads have precipitated into manifestation could also be questioned, for the fire mist indicates the earliest stages in nebular formation. So our question here is, let's see, how big will we write this? This is a 12. Okay, so I'm going to make this also a 12. All right. So we can say, to what degree have these monads even taken the monadic vehicle? They seem to be early in their cycle. Now, the monad is said to be that which has its home within the sun, or that which finds its home within the sun. It's initiation, human and solar. Let's see, is it about page 185, something like that? Let's check that out. That's it's such a good statement about the monad that one wants to really finds home. Yes, it's 196. The thinker on his own plane becomes the intermediary between that which is of the earthy, which is the personality, and that which finds its home within the sun. It's a somewhat vague description, but one thinks about the essential monad and realizes that it has to come from ever higher beings which generate septinates, and into which it flows by emanation, then on into other septinates, so septinates above, septinates below. And by the sun, I don't think is meant here the physical sun. So remember, he's talking about monads of a certain cycle, I believe. Now, this next group of monads, or monad egos, because this group did actually come in with some degree of pedal unfoldment, and some of them quite a bit of pedal unfoldment. We have discussed this already in terms of the moon chain monads. Their method of individualization was different, yes. But they had the lotus, and that would mean it would have to be generated by the interaction between the monad and the upward reaching aspect of the personality, the animal man of that cycle, because the solar angels did not intervene at that time. So points of lunar origin, we could say that this category seems quite straightforward, indicating those who achieved individualization on the moon chain. Well, okay, this is interesting. You know, I've often thought that the Buddha, well, he represents moon chain humanity. Do we know that the Buddha was individualized on the moon? Or could he have been first solar system humanity who appropriated an egoic lotus when coming to the moon chain? Buddha, individualization. And let's see here. Let's spell it correctly. Individualization. We'll see what he says here. The evolutionary cycle from individualization to, the cycle of initiation. This is not exactly what I'm looking for. The active the work of the particular Buddha responsible at the time. No, this is a Buddha of activity. No. So let's look at the word Buddha and individualize. Individualize. They spell it with an S. Individualize. Well, no, there's nothing there. So this can be a little mysterious, but the Buddha did come from the moon chain, and he was the latest of the moon chain humanity to achieve. He was ready to take the third initiation on the moon chain. I think that the fourth initiation was offered on the moon chain, but at the time he was ready to take the third. The third was not offered, and he had to take that when he came in much, much later in Atlantis. Did he really individualize on the moon chain? I want to kind of ask that. Did the... All right, so let's see if I can make this correct. Okay. So, did the Buddha individualize on the moon chain or in the previous solar system? He apparently was a monad of the previous solar system, in whom the seeds of that system ripened in this system. Anyway, there's so many of humanity now, at least advanced humanity, who are moon chain monads. And we are told that those coming into, well, let's see, we are told that of those who came from the moon, 75% were third-ray monads, monad egos, and 12.5% each were second and first-ray egos. So this, their origin here seems fairly straightforward. The moon chain coming into our earth chain later by a different method, probably brought in around the third sub-group or sub-race of the fourth root race. I think that would be perhaps correct. All right. I'm talking a little more slowly for various reasons. Some of them relating to health. One just cannot overdo it and speak too rapidly. I hope you can be patient with me. Also, the subject demands careful thought. So obviously the moon chain can never stand as the ultimate origin of any monad. The true origin of the monad is a matter for deep philosophical speculation, but is in fact unknown to us. But I suspect it is an aspect of the ray of the Absolute, And by absolute, maybe I should put this all in, ray of the absolute. And in any case, is an emanation of the universal logos. Sons of the sun. This is interesting. Alice Bailey, I've been told fairly authoritatively that she intended to start a new group within the arcane school that was to be called Sons of the Sun. These were to be applicants to the portal of the real initiation, the third initiation. At least they were to work in that direction. So the solar aspect of these monads is emphasized. So it may be that these monads have their origin within our sun, but then it may well be the case that the vast majority of monads living within our solar system have their origin in the sun, or that is, in some aspect of the solar logos. Probably essence requires identicality with essence, so it would be ultimately from the monadic aspect of our solar of our solar logos. DK refers to the monad as that which finds its home within the sun. Yes. From another perspective, those who have achieved the third degree could be called sons of the sun, for they have taken the first truly solar initiation. You know, the first two initiations are planetary and initiations of the threshold, and the next two initiations are, well, the next 5 initiations are solar. So mastership in relation to our sun is actually the 7th initiation, which is the 3rd initiation in relation to Sirius. These sons of the sun may be conceived as having their origin within this solar system rather than within the previous one. That's one way to think of it. Of course, you know, the suns are different, the entity is the same. The solar logos has had apparently 5 solar logoic incarnations, 3 of them minor, corresponding to the etheric, physical, astral, and lower mental. The last one responding to the personal, which is personal mental. Personality is of the 3rd aspect of divinity, and so when we talk about a previous third-ray solar system, we're probably quite correct, even though it may have had the personality focus. The present solar system seems to be given over to the development of the soul of our solar logos. So maybe these sons of the sun may be conceived as having their origin in this solar system rather than in the previous personal solar system. They can be, well, you know, it's very hard to think about even the proximate origin of the monad. I mean, you know, philosophically we can trace it all the way back to the one emanating source of all cosmos, but when we look at the monad's recent history, well, you know, from whence has it really come? Every planet is, in a sense, a chakric aspect of the sun. Every sun is a chakric aspect of a cosmic logos. Every cosmic logos is a chakric aspect of a supercosmic logos. Eventually they will all be chakric aspects of a galaxy, and the galaxy itself but a chakric aspect, an emanation of an aspect of a larger super galaxy, family of galaxies, and on it goes until we finally reach the one. So all of us are emanations of this. These sons of the sun, though, from the point of view of time, if they're passing through the 3rd initiation, then of course the opening of the 9th petal is characteristic of them. if we're talking about the kind of energy that they express, then within the particular egoic lotus, there's no way to locate them particularly. We can, because the egoic lotus is a cyclic structure, or the degree to which it is unfolded corresponds with time and cycles. The type of monad behind the egoic lotus, while it may be released in a certain time into manifestation, does not tell us so much about the unfoldment of the egoic lotus. I mean, if we know that points of lunar origin originated before, let us say, sons of the sun, we're likely to think that the point of lunar origin has a greater degree of unfoldment, but we cannot tell how much. The sons of the sun, well, if they are monads of this particular solar system, which, well, let me clarify that. A point of lunar origin would still be a monad within this solar system, and would be unfolding before one of these sons of the sun, probably. The sons of the sun probably are a certain type of ego, and the question is, at what time were they released? If they were released later, then their unfoldment will normally, except for rare examples such as the Christ, be of less development, less unfoldment. All right. Another, I really can only speculate upon the nature of many of these names. The devas of the fourth degree. What's interesting? There are 140 billion monads, Devic monads, in our solar system. And I think that has to be, there are 140 billion Devic monads within our solar system, and only 60 billion human monads. So when he talks about devas, these can certainly be monads. DK tells us that the second listing is a group, if human beings, and yet we see the term devas. So are these beings of the fourth category actually Devic monads? Okay. Are they human beings who have spent cycles in the Deva kingdom? So there's different questions I'm asking here. Are they actually Devic monads? Because every monad has every Deva has a monad. Every demonstration of the one infinite being has, in a sense, a monad, or is part of a monadic demonstration. So we can await the time of clarification. But, in our solar system, there are many planets which have far more Deva units than human beings. In this tabulation, are we only talking about those monads that unfold on Earth? Maybe not. And then the question would be, another question, would Deva monads have egoic lotuses? We would say, what would be their inner structure? And we have no teaching on that point. Their structure might be quite different, and yet they do unfold through intense feeling and through identification and through building themselves into form. They unfold in different ways than the human being unfolds. So would they apply in terms of egoic lotuses? Well, he talks about egos here in this section. Maybe it is so. And right below I can see, of course, that we are not just talking about egos from the Earth chain. I said here again, since the fourth degree is used, the fourth initiation could in some manner be indicated, or the fourth or Buddhic plane, and a focus in relation to it, possibly. Devas of the fourth degree. You know, increasingly as man rises, I wonder, interesting, the fourth degree. We should note that the solar angels seem to have a place on the Buddhic plane. And I think you can see that in one of our diagrams. If we go here just a little further, this one, and take a look at the Buddhic plane here, and we see solar angels, Agnishvatas, Buddhic. It seems a place, at least, to which they have descended in a kind of first fall, and they are working from that place in their first fall. The second fall would be their extension into the dense physical body of the solar logos, and hence the mental plane. Flames from interplanetary spheres. Well, obviously, this is, we are not simply speaking of Earth monads. These monads may have their immediate origin, before being transferred to the Earth scheme, on other planetary schemes, or there seems to be a suggestion there may be points of origin between the various planetary spheres. It depends on what the word inter means. Interplanetary, it can mean between, usually. Intra means within. And notice that monads are called flames. So, flames. Let's just say, put it like this. Can we think of the egoic lotuses as flames, or perhaps solar angels as flames, lords of the flame, Lords of the flame, of course, can be considered to be the Kumaras, and Kumaras can be considered as planetary logoi, but solar angels eventually make planetary logoi, so maybe in groups, so maybe the higher types of beings can be referred to occultly, subjectively, as flames. Anyway, they come from elsewhere, and whether they remain there or come to Earth, we have heard of rare monads that come to Earth now and again. DK discusses this in terms of monadic origin, or sometimes he just simply uses the word ego. It's up to us when we see that word ego to know whether he means an already formed egoic lotus, or whether he's concentrating on an earlier type of origin, the monad itself, arriving in the Earth scheme either ready to individualize or carrying with it, in a way, its own egoic lotus. One can also wonder about the obscure origin of what has been called the inner round, which may well be etheric locality, etheric globes. Every time you see a 7, you should suspect a 10, and the 3 that would make the 10 with the 7 may not be tangible. What else might we think of? Certainly such monads do not belong originally to our Earth scheme, but then you kind of wonder how many monads actually do belong originally to our Earth scheme at all. The reason we would ask is because our planetary logos does not create an expression that lasts throughout the Mahamanvantara. The reference on that, you might want to see it. Venus Mahamanvantara. Okay. And let's see what we have here. And here it is. Certain planets afford only temporary homes to these principles. The planets embody principles is what he's trying to say. Others persist throughout the Mahamanvantara. Of these, Venus is one. They embody principles. Let's see if there's anything else here. Vulcan-Venus scheme, the work is nearly complete. And this is the same reference about the Mahamanvantara, simply gathered at the end of esoteric astrology. Okay. Now we're talking about the coming of the lords of flame to the earth was all under law and not just an accidental and fortunate happening. It was a planetary matter which finds its correspondence in the connection between the mental unit and the monastic permanent atom. And you see, there is such a hint about the relation of Venus to the earth, Venus being the monastic permanent atom and earth upholding a kind of mental unit position. Again, as the Antakarana is built by individual man between these 2 points, so again, in a planetary sense, is a channel being built by collective man on this planet to its primary, Venus. Venus is the primary. Alter ego, the word primary is often related to monad, but okay, in this case, it is it may be actually that which absorbs the principle of earth eventually. But let's just say Venus is the sacred planet, Earth is not, and this seems to imply that Earth is not a planet which lasts throughout the Mahamanvantara. The mental unit really is providing a kind of temporary home to the monastic principle. It is consumed, isn't it? It's a kind of a division of the monastic permanent atom. And it even suggests in the relationship between the fourfold mental unit and the threefold monastic permanent atom, at least 3 spirille in that monastic permanent atom, that we have the earth, the mental unit being actually a part of the monastic permanent atom, completing the 7, and the earth, in a sense, being a part of Venus. But of this we will learn more trillions of years later, when there is an absorption of the subtle principles of the planet into greater planets with of greater development, of which Venus certainly is one. You know, the whole question of how planets are absorbed into each other is of the greatest interest. Okay, so flames from interplanetary spheres. So monads are called flames. And maybe in a certain sense, when you look at what the Egoic Lotus is in its truer demonstration, it can look flame-like. But this is a word which is flame is frequently used in terms of the monad. The monads are sometimes considered to be sparks hanging from the one flame by a thread of finest fohat. Now, here we go again. 6 atoms from the crimson sphere. And, you know, one thing is atoms, one thing is egos. A reference to egos who have come to this earth from the planetary scheme whose note is red. Well, there is the language is occult, mixing and blending the terminology of color and sound. Note is red. And we could say that the obvious choice for the origin of these monads is the planetary scheme of Mars, where the color red is always associated. I think if we look here, let's just go to this, and then we'll backtrack just a little bit. And here are the planetary schools. And of these planetary schools, at least for dense physical planets, which includes Vulcan, interestingly enough, we have of Mars, the School for Warriors, of the open grades for soldiers. 4 of these planetary schools are responsible for the energy flowing through the forecasts in all part of the world. So the Kshatriyas, aren't those the warriors? In India, they are the next to the highest class of Brahmins. Its teachers are spoken of as graduates of the ruddy flame and are frequently portrayed as clothed in red robes. The color rose is red is very associated with Mars. Ruddy, red, and elsewhere it tells how they carry ebony wands. For some, here it has dots, and in other places it talks about them carrying wands of black. I suppose black and red, it seems to suggest Scorpio. And when you're dealing with crimson, you are, I think, dealing with Scorpio. Scarlet red is more associated with Aries. So it seems to be Mars. Atoms from Mars, and monads are most definitely atoms. I think we have to understand that. Let's see. Monads are most definitely atoms. I mean, if a solar logos can be an atom, you know, a planetary logos an atom, so can a monad be an atom. And I think HBB writes about the identicality of monads and atoms. It's probably put forward in a different way than this, but any unit of being is an atom. Any unit of, well, I'll put this this way. Unit of being is occultly an atom. So when DK speaks of egos, there may be some suggestion that certain of the petals of the egoic lotus in these units were unfolded before these egos began to express within the Earth scheme. It is possible, although, you know, Mars is a less developed planet than Earth, just as Pluto is said to be, though it is esoteric, less developed than Mars, which is its alter ego, just as Venus is the alter ego of the Earth. So this word ego, spelled in small letters, spelled with a capital E, spelled in all caps, it means different levels of identity. The terms egos, ego, ego, and ego. This is found, you know, ego with all caps is found there on page 177, I think, of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and certainly represents the triad rather than simply the ego on the higher mental plane. All represent different levels of identity. So, are these monads that have come from Mars and then individualized? Yes. That's very interesting. I just had a thought here. The Lions of the Destroyer. I think, this is the first time this thought has come to me, but I gather that since so many of the first ray monads came in Atlantis, that these monads of destruction may have been among them. And that is why they will be delayed at the judgment day, because they will not be ready. All right, that, as you read through, I'm not saying that that supposition is absolutely correct, but it makes sense to me. It seems to follow the law of correspondences. And as you read along, these kinds of connections occur to you. And as they do, let's see, as they do occur, note should be made of them. There are many missing pieces in our understanding of the teaching. So, and yet DK has given us so much more on various levels, undetected levels. He's writing in a multi-layered manner for those with eyes to see, and then for the rest of us who may not have at a certain time eyes to see, and later gain eyes to see. So much is there that we don't suspect is there. And then something jumps out at you, and there it is. So, in terms of the Egoic Lotus, the Atlantean petals, well, let's just say that if you look at the Egoic Lotus, you realize how much Mars there is in this first petal, and also the second petal. And some of the least advanced of those who are with us now as human beings will have individualized in Atlantis rather than in Lemuria, and they are still in the Martian state, which we can call more the savage state. Also, they are connected, of course, with Atlantis and the Atlantean petal, which is the second petal. So, given that things will proceed in a normal way, we might say that according to the time of individualization, the cycle in which the individualization occurred, so will be the stage of development in which we find these different groups. But there's a lot of first ray in connection with Mars, and since it is a non-sacred planet, the ray that we are given concerning it, just as we are so much given the third ray in connection with the Earth, would be the ray of its personality. Third ray personality of Earth, let us presume sixth ray personality of Mars, with a first ray soul, and maybe a fifth ray monad, which is a supplementary monad, and finally a first ray monad in the higher sense. It could be. But this is speculation. One must speculate in order to understand, to put up propositions, test them, and see whether they really work. Vyasa was a great teacher. The successful Vyasians, he was a very ancient teacher, we are told, and helped men prove that death is an illusion. That's what DK says about him. So perhaps these were monads or egos grouped around him and instructed by him, and have successfully proved to themselves and others that death is an illusion. And were there then, we could say, unsuccessful Vyasians? This remains to be seen. And did such monads or monads, egos achieve in ancient days when their teacher was instructing humanity? Or are they still among us, are there still those among us who could be called successful Vyasians? In any case, it seems apparent that these monads or egos were linked to the teacher Vyasa, or to the stream of energy which emanated from him. Now, usually the chronology of that has been handed down to us, except for the Brahmanic chronology, is pretty condensed. It's pretty foreshortened. If we look at Vyasa here, is a central and revered figure in most Hindu traditions. He is sometimes also called Veda Vyasa in the Mahabharata. So let's just see. He looks like a very venerable sage author as well as character in the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. Called Veda Vyasa, the one who classified the Vedas into 4 parts, and also Krishna, the Vapayana, referring to his complexion and birthplace. Here it has Vyasa living around 3000 BC. Vyasa is also considered to be one of the 7 Chiranjivins, long-lived or immortals, who are still in existence according to the general Hindu belief. Well, certainly a master, certainly a high being. Vyasa lived around 3000 BC, although most scholars cite that the period of Vyasa was between 1800 BC and 1500 BC. Let's see what DK says about him. Vyasa, oh my goodness, there's quite a bit. Some of the great names during the later periods of known to history. Later periods are known to history. Let's see. They passed on, their places were taken among the members of the hierarchy who were willing to undergo. Many great beings from planetary and solar sources, once or twice from cosmic sources, have at times lent their aid. Profound wisdom was experienced. They stimulated the Earth evolutions and brought the purpose of the planetary logos so much the nearer to completion. Then they passed on, and their places were taken by those members of the hierarchy who were willing to undergo a specific training and expansion of consciousness. In turn, these adepts and masters had their places filled by initiates, and thus constantly has there been opportunity for disciples and highly evolved men and women to pass into the ranks of hierarchy, and thus constantly has there been a circulation of new life and blood and the coming in of those who belong to a particular period or age, probably divine circulatory flow. Some of the great names during the later periods are known to history as Sri Shankaracharya, apparently living BC, although many people have said AD. I think DK settles on BC. Vyasa, Muhammad, Jesus of Nazareth, and Krishna, down to all the lesser initiates, Paul of Tarsus, Luther, and certain of our outstanding lights in European history. Let's see the era. Some of the great names, Vyasa, okay? Veda Vyasa. This is in Light of the Soul, and it's taken, Alice Bailey is writing the commentary here. These are Vyasa's commentaries. Vyasa noted that the mind world is peopled by 6 groups. He was a very great sage. Vyasa notes, most of this is by Alice Bailey. I'm interested here, DK might be in a position to place the cyclic timing of Vyasa. In Light of the Soul, an analysis of the significance of these words and a study of the commentary of the great teacher Vyasa may serve to elucidate. It's mostly about what Vyasa said. In his commentary, he points out the karma or action is of 4 kinds, etc. A great sage indeed. And Vyasa says again. Vyasa says again. And Vyasa explains it thus. Now here we have some discussion of the reappearance of Christ, about the timing of the appearance of Vyasa, which might tell us something about who are successful Vyasians. I mean, are they those who were being taught or who have followed his teaching, taught by him at the time, or those who have followed his teaching? At some unknown date, Hermes came, and so the record says, and that's where DK is getting this from, was the first to proclaim himself as the light of the world. Later came the great teacher of Asa. Later the great teacher of Asa appeared. He gave one simple and needed message, that death is not the end. From his time, the thinking of humanity about the possible immortality of the soul can be seen to stem. Of course, in a way, humanity knew something of this with its closer contact to the spirit world, but then, according to Blavatsky, lost that sometime in Atlantis with a period of despiritualization and densification. In the period of culmination in which we now live, the work of the spiritualistic movement in its many forms is in reality the emergence, this is so interesting, of that stream of thought energy and of the idea which Vyasa, thousands of years ago, implanted in the human consciousness, thousands of years ago. So we get the idea, well, he didn't say millions of years. With Hercules, he was Atlantean. Vyasa may have been Aryan. Since Hercules was Atlantean, we're dealing with millions of years ago. Buddha was the next teacher to whom we should refer, though there were many between his time and that of Vyasa. Many between his time. Well, it can go in either direction. So Vyasa, I think, pretty much was pre-Buddha. Okay, here's another one. He made a unique contribution to the teaching given by Hercules and Vyasa. Who was that? Buddha did that. So Vyasa clearly was before. Hercules seems to have been a bit before Vyasa. Early Aryan it begins to appear. But that would take us back, many tens of thousands of years. Let's see. Buddha answered the questions posited in his time by giving the Four Noble Truths. Okay. The realm of living, which is the realm of death of the spirit, indeed. He made a unique contribution to the teaching given by Hercules and Vyasa, and added to the structure of truth which they had erected. Okay. Well, thousands of years ago, if it was 3,000 years ago that Vyasa lived, then we're talking 3,000 years BC, let us say. Then it is about 2,500 years before the Buddha. But then again, remember that the Buddha had to have been the Bodhisattva, the head of the hierarchy, for 2,500 years before he relinquished that position to Lord Maitreya, the Christ. Between the times of these two great teachers, the Buddha and the Christ, lesser teachers appeared to amplify and add. And of these, Shankara was one of the most important. So Shankara is definitely BC, because the Christ, we begin to date AD from the time of the Christ. Well, putting these things together, we want to get this sense of chronology. We can see that according to the Tibetan, it's more likely that the dates of Vyasa were some 3,000 years, and I would think even long before that. When was the Mahabharata actually created? And the Mahabharata has so much to say about the great battle that took place in India apparently 4 million years ago. So we have so much to learn about the chronology here. Is there anything else here? I know I've gone through this a bit exhaustively, but it is a matter of interest. Vyasa, the original Vyasa, who was a great individuality, evoked by the invocation of the early animal men, is still more than just a name, though he passed out of the... There we have it. He passed out of the planetary scheme millions of years ago. He opened a door into the human kingdom. Through his response to the animal kingdom, in its higher invocative ranks. His work brought about the process known as individualization. Well, the original Vyasa. There we have an interesting thing, and that would make him even earlier than Hercules. There must have been some important Vyasas who followed in his line after that point. Here we have kind of a discussion of Hercules, and then Sri Krishna, and then the Buddha. Sri Krishna, an incarnation of the Christ, but he died in 3001 or 2 BC, when, if things kind of add up, the Buddha would have had to taken on he would have had to take on the development of the bodhisattvahood. 2,500 years is the term of being head of the hierarchy, and he was head of the hierarchy, and it seems his term was fulfilled when the Christ took it over around Lord Maitreya around 500 BC. He wouldn't be called the Christ, he would be called Lord Maitreya in the Hindu terms. Well, the successful Vyasians, they know something about life and death, apparently, and they are, we don't know really when they came in. Now, it's interesting because DK tells us about individualizing man. The great individuality evoked by the invocation of animal men is still more than just a name. He passed out of our planetary scheme millions of years ago. He opened a door into the human kingdom through his response to the animal kingdom in its higher invocative ranks. His work brought about the process of individualization. Now, would these then be, and this is an interesting question, if Vyasa, we have to do it a little differently. Thanks for being patient with me here. Okay, if Vyasa opened the door, well, it says a door into the animal kingdom, and from the animal kingdom into the human kingdom, and that was only opened in this scheme 21 million years ago, then are the successful Vyasians, or Vyasians, those who individualized at that time. Because some, like the Christ, have been successful. Some are members of the hierarchy even now. So we're going back and forth between different periods of the past, and wondering, when the Vyasya that is here discussed originated. I'm so glad I saw it all through and waited until that last reference appeared. Down the ages, these sons of God, evoked by human invocation, have come, invoked by human invocation. In their turn, they have invoked certain aspects of the divine nature, deeply hidden in mankind, all related hitherto to consciousness and to responsiveness to the part of the whole. Eventually, so it sounds like time passed after Vyasa, after the original Vyasa, but then maybe another Vyasa came and was proving the immortality of the soul. In any case, in terms of the lotuses that these have produced, have many of them already passed out of the human kingdom. Vyasa has passed out of the planetary scheme altogether, so he must have gone on one of those great paths. All right. I know we took quite a bit of time with that, but it is interesting to note who this Vyasa may have been, or how many of them there may have been. There have been, there is in the East the tendency to take to oneself the names of great teachers, even as the Pope seems to take to himself the names of disciples and apostles and of other popes. The points in the third planetary petal and groups of others related to the 12-petaled planetary lotus. This is fairly obscure. There is a sense in which every planet is 12-fold, though the number of petals is differential when looked at in from other perspectives. So, are we speaking about the 12-petaled heart center of our own planetary logos? In which case, well, the third, it says planetary petal, and groups of others related to the 12-petaled planetary lotus. Is the third petal within the 12 petals, or is there a particular configuration of petals for our planetary logos of a certain number, and we're speaking of the third? Or are we speaking of the entire planetary scheme as being the third petal in the 12-petal lotus of the solar logos? The points in the third planetary petal, well, it doesn't sound like solar logoic petal. Which then, from the solar systemic perspective, is the third planetary petal? Is it Venus, considering the planets in their order from the sun, including Vulcan in order? Or, is Vulcan not to be considered? In which case the Earth is the third. Is it the 12-petaled planetary logos of our own planetary scheme, or could Jupiter, as the hypothesized 12-petaled heart center of the solar logos, be considered the 12-petaled planetary lotus? The 12-petaled planetary lotus. Yeah, not necessarily our planetary lotus. The third planetary petal, you see. It can be it can be considering our whole scheme as a petal, or it can be considering the different planets as chakras, each having a different number of petals. We may remember that in studying various groups of egos, the lotuses of Brahman originated on both Venus and Jupiter. Well, there's the points in the third planetary petal and groups of others related to the 12-petaled planetary logos. If we count Vulcan, then Venus is the third. So, and then the 12-petaled planetary lotus would be a heart center, and it's pretty clear that Jupiter can and should be considered the chakric heart center of our solar logos. The planets, in a way, are part of the solar logos. They are not exactly independent beings. There is no such thing as an independent being. So I think we see how this might work, and we can ask ourselves this question. It's quite obscure. Are there monads indicated here from Venus as the third planet, third planetary petal, if we consider Vulcan, consider him to be Vulcan, Mercury, and Venus, and from Jupiter as the 12-petaled heart center of the solar logos? Of course, in a way, we could say that Jupiter has its own heart center and the solar logos has its own heart center. But it appears that Jupiter is associated with the heart center of the solar logos, and Venus more with its solar plexus center. So DK tells us about these lotuses of Brahman. So let's just say it's a theory. Is this another way of viewing the lotuses of Brahman who are developing the second petal of the egoic lotus as found on this planet? And we could say not yet very highly developed. So, you know, we have different kinds of egos demonstrating different kinds of development according to their origin. Now, the points of lunar origin, well, many of them are already quite released. Some of them may be still part of the lotuses of passion and desire and will only achieve in, let us say, the end of the sixth root race of this, our fourth round. Others will achieve in the fifth round, but they are lunar origin and they are farther ahead in general than the lotuses of Brahman. So the lotuses of Brahman came in from Venus and Jupiter, and maybe another way of describing Venus and Jupiter are the third planetary petal and groups of others related to the 12-petaled planetary lotus being Jupiter. Now, there are other possible interpretations of here. What if, you know, but what if we are talking about our own planet? So then what type of petal are we talking about? And we could say, well, the monad has 12 aspects. The monad seems to be 12-fold, at least for man. Is the monad 12-fold for the planetary logos also? And if so, is the third petal related to intelligence in some way? So if we are talking about a 12-petaled monadic structure of our planetary logos, is the third petal related to intelligence? And are these monads coming in from his own monadic nature, or sort of stored in his own monadic nature, and coming in representing intelligence? I kind of like the earlier theory, however. It would be most interesting to look at the method of blinding the points in the third planetary petal, hidden implication of the solar logos, and groups of others related, multiple, related to the 12-petaled planetary logos, lotus. Ours, maybe not, maybe Jupiter. So a little bit obscure. Well, the lovers of low vibration. I guess we should not look at them as being excessively advanced in our present period. This name indicates, so it seems, the stage of development rather than a point of origin. Perhaps among units of all origins there are those who love low vibration. Why do they love low vibration? You know, we could say. Have you ever, you know, passed one of those or had one of those low riders with a booming boombox pass you? That is even a physically low vibration. It just affects the lowest chakras, and with that incredible booming pulsation. I think you all know what I mean. All right, so let's see here. Well, we might say, you know, they love low vibration because it is the only type of vibration which their crude stage of development can respond to. We know that as we become more etherealized and our vehicles rise in the frequency of their constituents, or through the frequency of their constituents, we can respond to ever more rapid and refined vibration. But here we have a low state which seems to relate certainly to the unfoldment of the petals of ignorance. One wonders whether a primitive expression of Vulcanian energy, the hammer blow, boom, boom, maybe some of you saw The Lord of the Rings, and I'm not sure which adventure it was, but they're kind of passing under the mountain. And they're supposed to do so very silently because the orcs and other demons are living below. And one of their group makes the mistake of dropping a bucket into a well, and it's heard, and then a drum begins. Very menacing drum. It's just a sort of thud, boom, boom. It just seems to evoke from the bowels of the earth all of these extremely unpleasant beings, and also evokes a still more fierce demon called the Balrog. Well, there are those of you who have studied The Lord of the Rings more than I have, but I was very impressed by the low vibration of that beating drum. And I think of the hammer blow of Vulcan and how it strikes its blow upon the drum head. Well, it could be Vulcanian. But then perhaps points from various non-sacred planets could be classified in this way. Suffice it to say, the level of evolution is not high. And therefore, the degree of unfoldment of the egoic lotus is not high. And among us, if there are lovers of low vibration, they are going to be found very much in the hall of ignorance. I think, we have to deal with those types of monad egos who have made their way to earth and who are unfolding among us. They may have origins which tell something about their nature, but we're interested in what they're going to do in terms of man and this planet. So we would expect, wherever these groups originated from, whether from Vulcan in some primitive sense, some non-highly developed Vulcanians, or whether from other non-sacred planets that have come to our planet, and there are so many non-sacred entities in our solar system, the majority are non-sacred. We don't know how many are fed into our planet and for what purposes. We do know pretty well that there are Martians, Venusians, Mercurians, Vulcanians, maybe among the primary lotuses, Jupiterians. Beyond that, I don't know whether we have references from the teaching, at least our teaching at this time, that there are other representatives of other groups. Plutonians, who knows? Neptunians, well, we certainly have people that are responsive to the Neptune vibration and have a strong vibration of Neptune in their monad. The rejectors of the eighth scheme. This is interesting because, we also want to remember that Saturn built a bridge for the members, for the human beings of the first solar system to come into our solar system. However this was done, we don't know. That's one way of looking at it. From what perspective, Saturn is the eighth scheme, but from another, Mercury is the planet, always associated with the number 8. If we begin, let's see, let's start to kind of count together. Vulcan, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Do I have that right? Vulcan, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Saturn is the, from another point of view, it's the 7th scheme in order. From another point of view, the 6th. From another point of view, Saturn is the 7th scheme, and from another, if we leave out Vulcan, the 6th. Now let me just make sure I'm doing this correctly. I almost have to count on my fingers to see whether I'm keeping them all in order. So we have the Vulcanian scheme, Mercurian, Venusian, Earth scheme. That's 4. 5 is Mars. 6 is Jupiter. 7 is Saturn. And if we leave out Vulcan, it's the 6th. In this case is Uranus, the 8th scheme. Of course, Saturn is so connected with the number 8. Also Kabbalistically connected with the number 8. And Mercury is the guardian at the 8th gate. Something has been rejected. Is it of value? Has that which has been rejected, is it of value? Is that which has been rejected of value? And is the result a compromised position? Or because of the rejection, is there an elevated position? It does seem... Okay, let's see a bit more here. The following reference may hold clue about those who reject the 3rd manifested creative hierarchy. Okay, right. Each hierarchy manifests the triple energy. You have to look for the word reject because I think it tells the story. The law of repulse is a rejecting energy. It seems to be, connected with the first ray and with Pluto. There are many forms of rejection. But sometimes we want to reject. The question is this rejection an advantage or a disadvantage to the monads involved? Each hierarchy manifests a triple energy or an aspect of each of the above, and that necessitates a ninefold differentiation. For the first 2 are triple, as is the 3rd. We're talking about hierarchy of divine flames, of divine builders, divine flames on the first or logoic plane, divine builders on the 2nd or monadic plane, and the triadal lives on the 3rd plane. And this is interesting. It is the rejection of the triadal lives by units in the 4th kingdom. Now, it is, in a way, the 8th hierarchy, and it is ruled by Saturn. Okay. It is the rejection of the triadal lives by the units in the 4th hierarchy, that of the human monads, which precipitates a man eventually into the 8th sphere. It's the association of the devil and Saturn and hell and decay and the dust hole that HPB talks about when she talks about the 8th sphere, a kind of a phantom planet that follows our planet around. The rejection of the triadal lives by the human monads, which precipitates a man eventually into the 8th sphere. He refuses to become a Christ, a Savior, and remains self-centered. So, let's just say, are these units upon the left-hand path? Okay. That's no good. All right, here we go. Are these units upon the left-hand path? Left-hand path. There are many on Earth and probably throughout the solar system. Well, I've had another idea. From another perspective, if Saturn is the eighth scheme, could its rejection suggest a rejection of the Brahmic aspect? Could this rejection then signify a kind of elevation into higher spheres? Well, I don't know. I just come up with some ideas. This is a particular group of monads. It's a planetary scheme, and we have to find out which one it is. I mean, really, it can be Neptune also, Uranus as well. I mean, Uranus. From a certain point of view, Uranus is the eighth. And I want to put that here. We have to remember that from a certain point of view, Uranus is the eighth scheme. But what would rejection of Uranus mean? Well, the number 8 is connected with Mercury. It's connected with Manus. It's connected with the evil use of Manus. 8 is connected with the evil use of Manus. Let's see, when an eighth hierarchy appears in the midst of the lower 7, then concrete mind is a problem. Yes, and we have the Black Lodge, which exalts concrete mind. But it sounds as if that type of, there's just so many ways to look at this. This is the problem. The eighth scheme, if it's Uranus, will rule the cosmic ethers, and have they in some way plunged into the dense physical vehicle of the solar logos and planetary logos because they reject the possibility of expressing on the cosmic ethers. Really, all I can do is offer some possibilities. Is there a rejection of mind, though? That is my question. Is there a rejection of mind and, therefore, of the Brahmic aspect? Well, that is a big enigma to me, and maybe we'll be able to figure that out as we go along. Right. How many more do we have? Oh, we have a few. We have a few more. This is going to take a little while. This is going to take a little while. Yes, let's go to page 1082 and 1081 of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. 1081. There we go. Okay. And we have... There are the human monad of any particular group, the planetary monad, etc., the monad in the vegetable kingdom. How interesting. This whole section is about the monads. But there is 1082, 1081, the equilibrized atoms rotating, I think we may be, yes, somehow we seem to be looking at the stages here. But there are also these equilibri, there are others that we have also to consider, very definitely. Okay, well, in checking on this, I see that I have actually begun with the list that is about origin and nature, and not so much about the list of development. I think I got things slightly out of order here. And the first list that should have been discussed is the list on page, let's see, do we have this? Yeah. Here, this page, 1081. But I have begun the list on 1082 first. So this can all be found, but without elaboration, in my commentaries on A Treatise on Cosmic Fire on Makara, www.makara.us. So let us see. I will continue then doing the second first and then come back to the first. When it comes here to the points of triple resistance, I've said, well, I suppose it depends on what's being resisted. Is it something higher or lower? Is the good being resisted in a triple way, or is threefold evil similarly resisted? We can say, whoops, no, that's not what I want. Yeah, I'll get that here. Is the threefold personality resisted? Is the threefold personality resisted? It sounds like it is a capacity rather than a signal of some deficiency. This sounds like a capacity rather than a signal of deficiency. Okay. Okay. But whenever we deal with the three, we think of either the three aspects of the personality, of the soul, of the triad, of the monad. They all have triple aspects. And are they able, let us say in this case, to resist the allure of the threefold lower personality, which demonstrates itself most in the hall of ignorance? Is that what is resisted? So let us say, is that which is found within the hall of ignorance resisted? Namely, the elemental power of the etheric physical vehicle, the astral vehicle, and the lower mental vehicle? Or is it something else? Is there a triple capacity of a higher nature to put up a triple resistance? Well, let's just say if there is a resistance to the threefold personality, then these units probably find themselves having transcended the hall of ignorance. But that is simply a speculation, and so much is put into this book, A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, which has later to be revealed, I suppose, by the Tibetan himself when the time is right. When there is resistance, there's either the resistance against good or the resistance against evil. So our question is, what is being resisted? It sounds, however, as if there is an ability. It does sound as if there is an ability to resist three types of force due to three types of higher energy which have been cultivated. But let time tell us. The followers of the Arhat. Well, are these the followers of the Buddha? There are certainly many of the sons of men today who, and during the course of the last 2,500 years, who have been followers of the Buddha. Of course, well, who is the Buddha? This is very interesting. We see, and how the word Arhat is being used. So, Arhat is an interesting word. It means a noble one, and may or may not be limited to the technical definition of the fourth degree. Perhaps an arhat is of the fifth degree. But there's also another interesting thing here, that it comes in with this: who was Gautama and who was the Buddha? If Gautama was the prince, as I've often said here, he may have played the same role to the Buddha, who was the head of the spiritual hierarchy for 2,500 years, almost 2,500 years at that time, as Jesus played to the Lord Maitreya the Christ. Gautama, well, this is what we can expect. We can expect that Gautama became an arhat, a fourth degree initiate, just as the Master Jesus did, or the initiate Jesus did. But then who is followed? It seems like Gautama is being followed, but it's really the Buddha within. It seems that Gautama is being followed, but really it is the Buddha. There's so many mysteries in this question of taking over the body of another or emanating into another. I think, Buddhism in its inner lore answers many of these questions. So we see that some of these monadic groupings are associated with particular teachers, Vyasa, Buddha, and also particular locations in our solar system. As such, these groupings do not necessarily indicate evolutionary status, as seems apparent in the first list of 13, which we have not yet considered because we're out of order. Okay. We are out of order, but maybe I will renumber these. Okay. Now, is the Arhat, the noble one, is the Arhat the Buddha? If he is the Buddha, then so many who are followers of him are going on the Bodhisattva path, and in terms of the Egoic Lotus are far advanced. They're certainly working in the sacrifice petals. Of course, they, interestingly, do not speak of the soul per se as existing. Maybe in esoteric Buddhism they do. In terms of the more commonly taught doctrine, there is not considered to be a soul. And so no attention is paid to the Egoic Lotus. But we are studying the Egoic Lotus, and we want to know where such people might be found, and certainly they themselves are becoming, well, not everybody that follows Buddhism, but if one practices Buddhism as presented by the best teachers, as presented by the best teachers, one will eventually become the Arhat, just like the one followed. One will go through the great renunciation and be working in the later stages of the petals. It is a mental path, because the Buddha was a third-ray monad. And as such, he presented a path for the deeply thinking, meditating individual. So we will find these people most likely, definitely beyond the stage of personality expression. So these people will be found beyond the stage of personality expression and cultivating the sixth petal and beyond, organizing and stimulating that and beyond. Do they go through the usual initiations that others pass through? Maybe what one passes through has a great deal to do with what one expects. The Buddhists don't expect anything like the kinds of initiations that Master DK, a great Buddhist master, Tibetan Buddhist master, has presented. I think he's presenting a kind of internal esoteric Buddhism. Mostly the focus is on stages which truly would lie beyond the egoic lotus development altogether. But of course, so many that are taking up Buddhism have just passed through the stage of personality expression and are beginning to become aspirants towards the truth, which means that they have to pass through the lower stages before they can completely renounce all forms and enter into voidness, emptiness, suchness, whatever they want to call it. So there still will be egoic lotus development, but a higher type. The cyclic sons of peace. We might presume that this group has a close relation with the planet Venus. What is their cycle? Well, we're not going to know that. How often do they manifest? Are they coming in for the 1,000-year binding of Satan following the second coming? We can say, are their cycles tied to Venusian cycles? Because if you think about it, let me put an N in there. What's happening here is a connection with the spirit of peace ruled by Libra and ruled by the second ray aspect of Venus, of Libra. I have a theory that Libra is a profoundly second ray sign, that a deeper part of it is second ray than third ray. We've been given the third ray. It might have something to do with the degree of evolution of the Lord of the constellation Libra. You know, how we're given certain rays according to the stage of development of the planet. Like Earth is usually considered third ray because it's mostly involved in personality expression. But Libra may also be involved with law, sex, and money, the third aspect of divinity, because it's mostly involved that way at its present stage of development. But I think hidden behind and within it is a great second ray, which is not discussed, just the way the great first ray of Scorpio is not discussed. There are, these lords have monad soul personality, and therefore three major rays. So the rays given are not always the rays which are presently being widely expressed. I mean, the second ray is not fully expressed with the Earth. It's said to be the true ray of Earth. But the second ray of Earth, of the logos of Earth, is hardly ever expressed or discussed. What about the second ray of Libra? It's hardly ever discussed. But the hints are there when we look at some of the cosmic paths. And also on page 333, it talks about divine love and understanding in relation to Libra. And that's not just Venus, because we're talking about the hierarchical position where the ruler is Saturn. So it's got to be connected with the constellation itself. Okay, the cyclic sons of peace, how advanced are they? We don't know, but, I would say fairly advanced, because their task demands it. And here, as a balance to what they are, come in the recurring sons of war. Does this group of monad or egos or monad egos have a regular cycle because they recur whenever conditions are correct for the recurrence, cyclically correct? Are we in such a time right now? It seems that we are. It would seem that the point of origin is Mars, and if not Mars, then at least they would be strongly influenced by that planet. Mars is the god of war, very simply. And, we had an earlier group that we attribute the atoms of the ruddy spheres. We might inquire whether there exists in active manifestation on our planet, and at this time a large grouping of those in this category. I think so. We might also inquire if they are related to the sixth ray, either in the soul nature or monadic nature. There is the, we're told about the aggressive fire of the sixth logos. I'm not sure what page that's on, but it might be Cosmic Fire again, and it might be 433. Yeah, it is. The aggressive fire of the sixth logos. Well, there's certainly some very Martian groups at the moment, and they are battling the Venusian groups. It's my sense that the day on our planet of these Martian groups is no longer, and that the Venus groups must prevail, and that the peace that the Christ, over which the Christ will officiate, must win the 1,000 years of the binding of Satan. Let's remember Satan, in the lower sense, is 666, or the triple personal form ruled by Mars. But 666 is bound, and Venus, the angel, prevails. So what are these cycles? They have to come in. I suppose in some fascinating way they both enhance each other, that the contending of opposites brings out the essential quality of those opposites, and it might be a faster way to sharpen and hone the particular skills, so that Mars will end up fighting for that which is worthwhile, and Venus will somehow learn through love to control these more violent impulses coming from Mars. Definitely Venus is the higher planet. So we would not expect the cyclic sons of war to be so highly advanced in the Egoic Lotus. The recurring sons of war to be so highly advanced. Maybe into the sacrifice petals in some circumstances. The noble warrior for a good cause. But the title of the group implies that the induction of war is their method. So, so often what we have is the reluctant warrior who has to fight and does not want to fight, but will fight as needed. And these seem to enjoy fighting. It seems that the lunar lords are at work. The first four petals that are lunar. See, if you look at this interesting fact, the lunar lords are ruled by Mars and the moon together. So the first four petals are in a way lunar, climaxing with Cancer, the fourth petal. Mars and the Moon, though, are connected. So when we're just fighting for ourselves and for the personality and for the right of our ancestral lords to have their way, because Jupiter is, find a place, right? Jupiter is the god of the ancestral lords and is exalted in Cancer. Jupiter exalted in Cancer. Which rules the fourth elemental, the personality elemental. So I would not expect to see such a high stage of development with these groups. Now, you see, basically we're talking about types of monads here, types of monad egos. It's sometimes a little hard to discern their stage of development, but according to their type, sometimes we can know. However, when it comes to the other list, it pretty much is a cyclic list, a developmental list. This is not so much a cyclic developmental list, but it has its implications in terms of time. The specks within the planetary eye is that our specks is another name, you know. These are names for monads. Specks, points, atoms, flames, all names for monads. So it would seem that this could be an advanced group which was part of the planetary logos' ability to see. Let's see. Which one of the 7 monadic groupings on the monadic plane pertains to the eye? Because, you know, there are going to be, just check out around page 37 of Letters on Occult Meditation, there are going to be 7 monadic groups. One of them is going to be up here connected with the Ajna center in the body of the planetary logos. In this connection, we are told that the monad is to the planetary logos what the third eye is to man, esoterically understood. So through these specks, the monad sees. Through every aperture, through every monadic aperture, the logos sees. Through every monadic aperture, the logos sees. And it's really our planetary logos we're talking about, I think. It's hard to know when he's talking about our planet and when he's talking about what comes from other planets to our planet. So specks are like points, and points are lives. That's another term we could use for lives, sparks, volatile essences, all names for monads. So this might also be a particular group of monads associated with the Ajna center, of the planetary logos. That's what I've been trying to say. What is the Ajna center? Well, you know, it's our planetary logos. Maybe some other planet rules the Ajna center, and maybe Mercury has a lot to do with it. We have read that all human monads find their place in a peculiar center within the planetary logos, and the Ajna center associated with the function of seeing is one of the higher ones. And then we can ask, is there a Mercurian function here? Anyway, the idea of sight is associated, let's say sight is associated with the mind and the fifth ray. Oh, can I get that correct? Yes, the fifth ray. So maybe these tend to be higher in their expression and are working with Mercury yellow, and the sacrifice and synthesis petals. We have also to ask whether in some way these specks actually assist the sight of the planetary logos or impede it. Well, you talk about, how does it said, the mote and the beam. Mote to mote, and this is not quite correct. It's mote, which means a little bit, to mote and beams. Beams within the eye. A beam is much bigger. A mote is like a speck. So are they impediments or are they methods of assistance in the seeing? If the monad is as a third eye to the planetary logos. Anyway, a higher grouping, it seems, and closely connected with the third eye, which is the better eye even than the pituitary eye. So let's say closely connected with the third eye. And connected, it seems, with planetary logoic vision. Well, let's just say we really start to see when we find ourselves in the sacrifice petals, loving sacrifice reveals. And synthesis is all, Buddhi is about sight. And the Buddhic petals are the synthesis petals. So from sacrifice to synthesis, we would expect this to occur. Loving sacrifice reveals. Okay, I think we have one more. The recognized points within the chakras, and these naturally exist in 10 groups. Whoa. Whose chakras? Whose chakras? Are these the planetary logoic chakras or the solar logoic chakras? The chakras exist in 10 groups. Well, what we usually have here, when we look at a picture that might be useful, is we have this, the 7 below the 3 above the 7. We also have the tree of life with the 10 Sephiroth, 7 below, 3 above. If these naturally exist in 10 groups, well, you kind of wonder when you turn to page here in Letters on Occult Meditation, page 39, and you have 7 monadic groups. You kind of wonder in some way, although these are all multiples of 7, do you have 3 greater groups on the logoic plane? Certainly the chart here, chart 5 on page 344 of Cosmic Fire, seems to indicate that one does. So all of these will be associated with different chakra groups in the whatever, in the solar logos or planetary logos. So we have to think in terms of 10. The spleen, alto major 7, the 7 head centers, considered as one grouping, the heart and the head center, all these are possible chakras to be added to the normal enumeration of 7 in order to make the requisite 10. But within a greater being, there are 10 chakras, and monads are part of them. So within a greater being, such as the planetary logos, or perhaps, planetary logos or simply solar logos, there are 10 chakras, and monads find their placement within the chakras of these beings. So, if we're talking about 10 chakras within a planetary logos, and thus perhaps his 10 chains as points of origins for various types of monads. The chains seem to be the major chakras within a planetary logos, currently expressing through a planetary scheme. Might be chains, and as I said, or are we talking about chakras of a solar logos, the various planetary logoi and their schemes, fulfilling the roles of chakras within the system of our solar logos. So DK might be telling us that various types of monads or egos come from planetary schemes. If we count Vulcan, we have 10 such schemes, let's just say, but eventually 12 schemes, and really many, many more of a non-sacred variety, eventually 12, and all eventually will be sacred. So when looking at the egoic lotus, it's really hard to say, if they're coming from different chains of different stages of development or different planetary schemes, what their stage of development might be. So this is a very full, very complete kind of enumeration. But their origins are there, and although every type of quality associated with an origin has a particular sort of rhythm of unfoldment or speed of unfoldment, we're not in a position to assess that. We're just in a position to see what the different types have been, and I think what we should do is just read them, back to ourselves. We've kind of tried to explain some of them a little bit. Units of the fire mist stage. Well, that's a kind of a stage, but it is a particular grouping. Points of lunar origin. Sons of the sun. Devas of the 4th degree. Flames of interplanetary spheres, flames from interplanetary spheres. That Devas of the 4th degree, it could be monads that have achieved the 4th degree. But, these titles, these names are among the most obscure that we can find in the book. So we cannot expect of ourselves any definitive interpretation, just some thoughts in the direction of what an interpretation might be, but those tendrils of thought will bring down the lightning of intuition when the time is right. Flames from interplanetary spheres, atoms from the crimson sphere, a reference to certain egos who have come in to the earth from the planet whose note is red. And the idea of coming into the earth is really what has to be emphasized here. These may have all kinds of origins, but they do apparently come to the earth. The successful Vyasians may be one who integrates early on in the Lemurian days is, in a sense, a Vyasian when you consider who the first Vyasya was. The points in the 3rd planetary petal and groups of others related to the 12-petaled planetary lotus. The lovers of low vibration. The rejectors of the 8th scheme. The points of triple resistance. The followers of the Arhat, all in capitals. Arhat of a high nature. The cyclic sons of peace. The recurring sons of war. The speck within the planetary eye. The recognized points within the chakras. These naturally exist in 10 groups. Well, what a load of occultism one must have digested before it is possible to be definitive about these origins of the points. You see, an egoic lotus is not really a point. An egoic lotus is a fulfillment, an outgrowth of a point. The point is really the central fire that is found at the heart of the egoic lotus. And it reflects the monad, which can be more properly called a point. The point really is the essence. It's the essential appearing as something specific. So in a way it can be the origin of the egoic lotus, but I think we should not consider a point as the egoic lotus per se. So each name conveys to the mind of the initiate some knowledge as to the place of the monad concerned, the nature of its incarnations, and its place in the cyclic evolution, Well, the nature of its incarnations, yes, perhaps, if we know enough, if we knew what a master knew, if we had all knowledge on the third subplane of the atmic plane. We get the sense of beginning and end here, of early work and later fulfillment. We're not necessarily told what the cycles are. We get the sense of origin, and origin can help us determine the kinds of cycles that the originating unit is involved in now, its place in cyclic evolution. Later, we're going to look at those names that have definitely more to do with the stage of unfoldment of the monad. I think so. But there's no question about it. This is the monad we're talking about. And we'll just say, even though the monad is called ego, or ego, it is the monad. So he began talking about egos, didn't he? But now he has told us what he's really talking about, though every monad is going to be represented as an ego, so it's okay to speak of the ego as long as we keep it connected to the monad. Okay, there is a little more to say here. Obviously, one cannot go through the entire book, Cosmic Fire. I've written so much about it, but I see that if I had the chance to elaborate on it, it would be a little better, but in the time one has. So let us tabulate. See, so each name conveys to the mind of the initiate some knowledge as to the place and evolution of the monad concerned, the nature of its incarnations, and its place in the cyclic evolution. And I kind of realized that he may be referring back to the list on page 1081 as well, because, you know, I began with the second first. So let us tabulate what the names of these groups convey to the initiate. So it's the place in evolution of the monad concerned, the nature of the monad's incarnations, the place of the monad in cyclic evolution, and we should also add that a number of monadic points of origin are to be found in this tabulation, but not, it seems, in the prior listing. We do note that DK has used the word monads, so it is indeed of monads we are speaking, yet also at times of the monad's expression as an ego, that is, as a spiritual triad or as an ego in a causal body on the higher mental plane. So either one, as a spiritual triad or as an ego on the higher mental plane. Sometimes when Master DK speaks of egos, he is really referencing monads. Monads do express an auric egg, just as egos do. So we have that in mind. You know, because as we're studying the egoic lotus, who is it that's evolving? This is the question. We look at the lotus and we say, oh, this one's thus unfolded and that unfolded. But who is the monad behind the egoic lotus? And how does that monad, its point of cyclic entry, its origin determine how the unfoldment is proceeding. Maybe even, certain ray tendencies showing up in the egoic lotus will be as a result of what the monad is. The same method of grouping is used in connection with all the kingdoms, though only in the case of the fourth and the fifth kingdoms are individual atoms dealt with. Maybe groups of monads are found in relation to the other kingdoms, and maybe when they take their in metallization, in vegetalization, in zoonation, they do that as groups. That has yet to be revealed to us. It seems that we have a lot more to learn about man, particularly before we can know so much about the lower kingdoms, whose consciousness is outside our range of apprehension. So this is interesting. In kingdoms earlier than the fourth and later than the fifth, the group expression must obviously, be paramount. And below the fourth kingdom, we have unconscious group expression. Beyond the fifth, we have superconscious group expression. Who's a member of the fifth kingdom? Well, everybody up to the master. From the first initiation, the newly entered member of the fifth kingdom. At the fifth initiation, the highest member of the fifth kingdom. When one becomes a monad, they are no longer men, as are the masters. Well, they are perhaps members of the fourth creative hierarchy, the hierarchy of human monads, but not men per se, not human beings per se. A master is the last human being, then comes the Chohan. And they actually enter into, this is interesting, do they stay as members of the fourth creative hierarchy, or are they planetary lives? That is a question that I really have to consider. In a way, they are members of the fourth creative hierarchy. They haven't moved on and become solar angels. They haven't entered. They enter different kingdoms. The planetary lives is a kingdom. The fifth kingdom is a kingdom. The kingdom of soul is a kingdom. You can be a member of the fourth creative hierarchy and still stay as a member of those kingdoms. So the tabulations and records for the other kingdoms are concerned with groups, and when the group is known, the nature, vibration, and rhythm of the atom within that group is immediately apparent. Well, there's so much to learn. It's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful study. Even on our tiny little planet, this tiny little speck of dust, the whole universe is just a speck of dust. The whole universe is a ciphered point, a vacuous point with no own being, self-being, all generated from the one infinite being, the Absolute. So this is a very interesting thought here. The state of the group reveals the state of the atom, and the individual atoms within these groups then, are they so similar that the group state would reveal the individual atomic state? Yes. There has been no great pursuit of distinction here. That happens when individualization occurs, and then the factor of differentiation really enters. We also see that in the fifth kingdom of nature, the kingdom of souls, the factor of individuality is still very important. I mean, indeed, from the time of the first degree initiate and on to that of the master, the individuality is still very important. This has definite implications for man's development. We certainly do not lose our individuality when we enter the fifth kingdom. If anything, it is intensified. Though the relationship of that individuality to various groups is also increasingly emphasized, and even as a monad, even as one who returns as a sixth degree initiate, there is the indivisibleness of individuality, but there's also such an intense relatedness, a beingness, that it overshadows the distinction, and it is the whole that is seen, and all the parts of the whole are seen within that whole and do not stand forth in the greatest importance. It is the whole that is more important. Well, I'll tell you what, I see how I've kind of begun this, and two groups of monads arranged by type and cycle, and I just want to say first by type. And then we'll take the next one by cycle, and we'll be going from page 1082 and 83 to back to 1081. So that's just the way it turned out. I could change around the numbering, but I think in light of what I've said, it's better to keep them in order. So this is the end of Egoic Lotus webinar commentaries, program 19, 2 hours, 15 minutes, and we're in TCF 1082 and 1083. That should be enough for the moment. Plenty to think about. We have to think with what we've got. We have to learn with what we have. If we don't know, we have to try to know. And inevitably we will know, because we are the one and only being who is essentially omniscient. We will know all. So just a question of patience, and on we go. All right, friends, we'll go on to number 20 next. And it'll be beginning of Egoic Lotus Webinar Commentaries, Program 20. We don't know how long it will be. TCF 1081, approximately. Maybe it's 1080 also. And this has lasted now 2 hours and let's call it 17 minutes. Okay, we'll see you soon. We'll continue with this. And, you know, it's all the supportive material we need to go into the Egoic Lotus petal by petal, so we can get in our thought a synthesis of thought. Okay. See you soon.